My boss laughed in my face when I signed my resignation. "You're too old," he said. Those words, uttered with icy disdain in the glass-walled office on the 30th floor, echoed in my mind like thunder. Evelyn, 62 years old, with over 4 decades of dedication to Sterling Innovations, a tech company I helped build from the ground up, was being discarded. My hands trembled slightly as I held the pen, not from weakness, but from a contained rage that threatened to explode. The arrogant smile of Mark, my boss, a man barely my son's age, was the icing on the cake of humiliation. He leaned back in his leather chair, his eyes fixed on me, as if I were an obsolete object to be removed. I had started at Sterling when it was just a promising startup in a Silicon Valley garage. I watched it grow, prosper, face crises, and emerge stronger. I knew every screw, every code, every client. My experience was a living archive of the company, but to Mark, I was just a cost, a wrinkled face in a sea of young talent. "Evelyn, the market is changing. We need new energy, fresh ideas," he had said in the termination meeting, avoiding my gaze. "You're a legend here, but, well, your time has passed. Legend. What a cruel euphemism for disposable." At that moment, as the ink of my signature dried on the document that sealed my fate, a silent promise formed in my heart. It wasn't a promise of petty revenge, but of justice. A justice that would make Mark and Sterling Innovations understand the true value of experience and loyalty. If you've ever felt underestimated, if your dedication has ever been ignored, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your empathy for Evelyn's pain is what connects us. I left that office with my head held high, but inside, a fire was just beginning. The world outside, the vibrant downtown San Francisco, seemed oblivious to the storm brewing within me. The days following my dismissal were a blur of conflicting emotion. The pain of rejection was deep, but mixed with it, an unusual clarity began to emerge. I had been the mother of Sterling Innovations for so long that I had forgotten who Evelyn was without it. Now, with the void left by the work routine, I began to revisit memories, to analyze every detail of my years at the company. And it was in this process that the seed of my plan began to germinate. Mark, in his youthful arrogance, had underestimated not only my age, but also my intelligence and my knowledge. He saw only a woman too old, unable to keep up. What he didn't know was that for years, I had been the silent guardian of Sterling's deepest secrets. I had access to files no one else bothered to organize, to data that young programmers considered legacy, and that Mark, in his haste for innovation, had completely ignored. This was crucial information, hidden vulnerabilities, that could be the company's downfall if they fell into the wrong hands. I spent hours in my apartment in a quiet Oakland neighborhood, sifting through my old personal files, notebooks, and email backups. It wasn't an act of malice, but of self-preservation and a burning desire to show that experience doesn't fade with age. I didn't want to destroy Sterling, the company I loved, but I wanted those who devalued it to feel the weight of their actions. I wanted Mark to understand that the legacy he despised was, in fact, the foundation upon which his precarious empire was built. With each document I reviewed, each line of code I remembered, my plan became clearer, more relentless. I wasn't a vengeful woman, but I was a woman who firmly believed in justice. And justice sometimes needed to be delivered with a touch of irony. The next morning, a gray and rainy day in San Francisco, I sat in front of my computer, my heart pounding with a mix of nervousness and determination. The email was ready. The recipient was Mark, and the subject, simple and direct. "A final contribution from your legend." I attached the file. It wasn't a virus, nor a leak of confidential data in the criminal sense. It was something much more subtle, much more devastating for Sterling Innovations. It was irrefutable proof of a series of imprudent financial decisions, poorly negotiated contracts, and a critical security flaw in one of the company's flagship products, all meticulously documented and ignored by Mark and his young and innovative team. With a firm click, I sent it. The feeling was one of a weight being lifted from my shoulders, but also of a chilling anticipation. I knew the impact that file would have. Hours later, I received a phone call. It was Sarah, my former colleague and confidant, her voice a terrified whisper. "Evelyn, you won't believe what's happening here. Mark, he's in total panic." I listened intently, imagining the scene. Mark, the young and arrogant CEO, confronted with the naked truth of his own incompetence, revealed by the woman he had discarded. The image Sarah described perfectly matched my imagination. Mark, in his office, his face pale, almost translucent, his eyes wide with terror as he read and reread the document I had sent. He's screaming, Evelyn, saying it's impossible, that it's a conspiracy. But the numbers are there. That email, that simple attached file, had unraveled the web of negligence and mismanagement that Mark had woven, exposing Sterling Innovations to financial and legal risks that could, in fact, bring it to the brink of bankruptcy. Mark's sneer had turned into a mask of pure horror, and I, Evelyn, the woman he considered too old, had been responsible for that revelation. Sarah's phone rang again, and I knew the chaos at Sterling Innovations was just beginning. That file I sent wasn't a bomb, but a series of small cracks that, once exposed, would reveal the fragility of the structure Mark had built. The information I compiled, meticulously collected over years of experience and observation, detailed flaws in key projects, budget deviations in marketing campaigns, and, most seriously, security vulnerabilities in a newly launched software that, if exploited, could compromise millions of users' data. Sarah, her voice choked, described the scene. Emergency meetings called in a hurry, lawyers being activated, and the board of directors demanding explanations. Mark, who once displayed unshakable confidence, now staggered under the weight of the revelations. Evelyn, he's trying to blame the development team. But the documents you sent, they point directly to his decisions, she whispered. The irony was sweet. Mark had fired me for being too old for the company's new direction. But it was my notes, my memory, and my insight that were now unraveling his incompetence. What he considered obsolete legacy was, in fact, the compass that could have prevented the shipwreck. The news spread like wildfire. Former colleagues, some who had distanced themselves for fear of retaliation from Mark, began to seek me out. They confirmed the climate of fear and the culture of silencing that Mark had imposed, where any criticism or concern was seen as disloyalty. My action, though solitary, had given voice to many who felt powerless. I was not seeking the destruction of the company, but its purification. Sterling Innovations deserved to be saved from a leadership that was corroding it from within. A week after sending the email, I received a formal call from the board of directors of Sterling Innovation. The voice on the other end, grave and urgent, was Richard Thompson, one of the oldest and most respected board members, whom I had known since the company's early days. Evelyn, we need you. It's a delicate situation, but your expertise is indispensable. That request, coming from those who had fired me, was proof that panic had set in. They needed me, the too old woman, to put out the fire that the young and innovative Mark had started. I accepted the invitation to a meeting, but with one condition. It would be in a neutral location and I would not be alone. I brought my lawyer, Dr. Peterson, a shrewd and discreet man who had advised me from the beginning. The meeting took place in a law firm in downtown San Francisco, away from the curious eyes of Sterling. The room was filled with serious faces, Richard Thompson, other board members, and to my surprise, Mark, sitting in a corner, pale and visibly shaken. Richard began, Evelyn, the documents you sent us reveal a series of serious irregularities. The company is at risk of lawsuits, loss of customers, and a significant drop in market value. He avoided mentioning Mark's name, but everyone's gaze in the room turned to him. Mark tried to intervene. This is a misunderstanding, a misinterpretation of old data, but Richard cut him off coldly. Mark, the data doesn't lie, and the negligence regarding the security of our software is unacceptable. This was the moment. The power game had turned. I was no longer the dismissed employee, but the holder of vital knowledge that could save or sink the company. The tension in the room was palpable. Richard Thompson, with a firm voice, made the offer. Evelyn, the board is willing to offer a settlement, immediate reinstatement, with a senior consultant position, a substantially higher salary, and a generous bonus for your contribution. He hesitated on the last word, avoiding saying revelation. Mark, from the corner of the room, looked at me with a mixture of plea and hatred. He knew his career at Sterling was hanging by a thread, and my presence there, as his savior, would be the final humiliation. I listened to the offer calmly, but inside, a voice reminded me of Mark's words. You're too old. That bonus, that position, were crumbs compared to the dignity he had tried to steal from me. Dr. Peterson, beside me, gave me a slight tap on the arm, a sign for me to maintain my composure. Gentlemen, I began, my voice clear and controlled, I appreciate the offer. However, what brought me here was not the pursuit of a position or a bonus. It was the pursuit of justice and the integrity of Sterling Innovations. Mark, who had been silent until then, exploded. Justice? You're trying to destroy the company! You're a bitter old woman. Richard Thompson immediately reprimanded him, but I ignored him, keeping my gaze fixed on the board. I am not destroying Sterling. I am exposing the flaws that were destroying it. And unfortunately, Those flaws were caused by a leadership that devalues experience and loyalty. The room fell silent again. Their offer was an attempt to silence me, to buy my cooperation. But I was not for sale. I had a plan. And it didn't involve returning to the golden cage they offered me. The boardroom was in a deathly silence after my refusal. The board members exchanged glances, surprised. Mark, still pale, seemed to have lost the ability to speak. Richard Thompson, the most experienced among them, broke the silence. "Evelyn, if it's not a position or a bonus, what do you want? What is necessary for us to resolve this situation?" His voice was cautious, almost pleading. I looked at each of them, at the faces that represented the power and direction of Sterling Innovations. "My condition is not for me, gentlemen. It's for Sterling. It's for the future of all the employees who dedicate their lives to this company, and who, like me, were devalued by short-sighted leadership." I paused, letting my words resonate. First, Mark must be removed from his position. His management not only put the company at risk, but also fostered an environment of disrespect and fear. He is not fit to lead. Mark tried to stand up, indignant, but was restrained by one of the lawyers. "Second," I continued, ignoring the commotion, "I want Sterling Innovations to immediately implement the security recommendations and process optimizations I detailed in the file I sent. These are not suggestions. They are critical flaws that need to be corrected." Richard Thompson nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on mine. "And finally," I added, my voice gaining strength, "I want Sterling to create a mentorship and appreciation program for its most experienced employees. Those who, like me, built the foundation of this company. That experience be seen as an asset, not a liability." The room fell into an even deeper silence. My conditions were clear, direct, and to them, perhaps shocking. I wasn't asking for money, but a fundamental change in the company's culture and leadership. I didn't just want revenge. I wanted reform, and at that moment, I knew they had no choice but to seriously consider each of my demands. The too-old woman was calling the shots. The board's decision came quickly, though not without internal resistance. Mark was fired. The news spread through Sterling Innovations like wildfire, and the relief among employees was almost palpable. Many sought me out, silently thanking me for having the courage to do what no one else dared. I did not return to the company, but I accepted a position as an external consultant, with the responsibility of overseeing the implementation of my recommendations and the development of the new experience valuation program. Sterling Innovations began a process of deep restructuring. Security flaws were corrected, processes optimized, and to the surprise of many, the company began to regain the trust of its customers and investors. The mentorship program, named Legacy Builders, became a success. Younger employees, previously obsessed with disruption, began to learn from the wisdom of veterans, realizing that true innovation is built on a solid foundation of knowledge and experience. Mark, on the other hand, faced the consequences of his arrogance. His reputation in Silicon Valley was tarnished, and the doors that once opened to him now remained closed. The company he had tried to mold in his image, discarding those who built it, now prospered without him, thanks in part to the intervention of the woman he had humiliated. I watched everything from afar, with a quiet satisfaction. There was no noisy triumph, just the certainty that justice in some way had been served. Sterling was healing, and I had played a crucial role in that. Months turned into years. Sterling Innovations not only recovered but flourished, becoming an example of how experience and innovation can coexist. The Legacy Builders program was expanded, and the company's culture transformed, valuing every voice, every decade of dedication. I, Evelyn, continued as a consultant, but my main focus shifted. With the time and freedom I regained, I began to dedicate myself to an old dream, a small consulting business for startups, where I could share my vast experience without the constraints of corporate politics. My personal life also flourished. I reconnected with old friends, traveled to places I had always wanted to see, and, most importantly, found a new passion in helping young entrepreneurs avoid the mistakes I had seen made so many times. Mark's arrogant smile, the words "too old," had been the catalyst for a new phase of my life, a phase of purpose and fulfillment that I never imagined possible. One day, I received an email. It was from a young CEO of a promising startup, asking for my mentorship. At the end of the email, she wrote, "I hear you're a legend, Evelyn. Someone who not only built companies, but also saved them. We need your wisdom," I smiled. The word legend now had a new meaning, one I embraced with pride. The company that fired me for being too old didn't break, but transformed. And I, the woman they tried to discard, found an even sweeter new beginning. If this story inspired you to value experience, to fight for your dignity, or to believe that it's never too late for a new beginning. Leave your comment, like this video, and subscribe to the channel for more stories of overcoming adversity.